Hello everyone, welcome to my SHG Hyperdrive YouTube channel. I hope you all doing good. And today we are going to discuss about one of the important topic in the biology subject, especially animal biology, that is zoology, that is the plasma membrane structure and function. And let's move on to the topic. So, plasma membrane, also called as a cytoplasm membrane or cell membrane. So, you all know that plasma membrane is also called a cytoplasmic membrane because the membrane is made up of plasma, and the cytoplasm which is present inside the cell is protected by a membrane. Protective membrane is called as plasma membrane. That's why the membrane which protects the cytoplasm, that is the living jelly-like substances which is present inside the cell, which is protected. That's why it is called a cytoplasmic membrane or a cell membrane. You also know that the membrane which protects the and covers the cell, that is called also cell membrane. So that's why it is called a plasma membrane, cytoplasmic membrane, and also a cell membrane. So acts as a boundary of a cell. You all know that it protects the cell from its external environment, and it separates the cell from its external environment and from the internal environment. That's why it looks and it works like a barrier which separates the plasma membrane from its internal environment from its external environment. And the thickness, the size of the plasma membrane is about 5 to 10 nanometer thickness. It is very small, right? That's why it cannot be seen through our naked eyes. So in unaided eye, we cannot see this plasma membrane. Only with the help of electron microscope we can see this plasma membrane very clearly and study the plasma membrane very thoroughly. So prokaryotes and eukaryotes also have a plasma membrane, but in the composition, the prokaryotes is mainly made up of phospholipids and proteins. But in case of eukaryotes, so it is also the addition of phospholipids and proteins. In addition, the addition of carbohydrates and sterols can be seen. The sterols means cholesterol, right? So cholesterol is also important for the eukaryotes to develop a plasma membrane for their normal function and movement like those. So it is made up of a phospholipid bilayer. So plasma membrane is made up of a phospholipid bilayer. So what is phospholipid bilayer? Let's we talk about it. So phospholipid bilayer. What do you mean by phospholipid? Phospholipid. The name itself defines that the phospho means it consists a phosphate group and a lipid. That is, it consists a lipid group. That's why it is called a phospholipid bilayer. So that's why we discussed here what is phospholipid bilayer. The bilayer which is made up of a phosphate and a lipid group. So you can see here the structure of phosphate. You can see the structure of phosphate and that is work like a head, which is a head part, and you can look the tail part, which you can see like a rod like structure, right? It is made up of a fatty acid. So the phospholipid bilayer consists of a two part, that is phosphate part, that is head part, and fatty acids tail part. So what is the composition of and how is the character of this phosphate group? So the fatty acid tail is a hydrophobic in nature. Means hydro means water, means hydro means water, and it is a hydrophobic, means the fatty acid tail is made up of a hydrophobic, and it character is a hydrophobic, means hydro means water and phobia means hating. So it hates the water. It doesn't want to combine with the water. It doesn't want to mingle with the water. It hates the water and it avoids water very frequently. That's why the fatty acid tail is a hydrophobic in nature. And next, the phosphate group, that is head group, is made up of a phosphate that is hydrophilic in nature. The character or the nature of a phospholipid is a phosphate group is a hydrophilic, means you all know that hydro means water and philic means someone who loves. So love it, that part, that is head part, which is a phospholipid that is made up of a phosphate, is a water loving part, and it always wants to mingle with the water, and it leads to the contact and always near to the water. It always likes to near to the water. That's why it is a hydrophilic in nature. Arranged as a bilayer. So phospholipid bilayer is a arranged like a bilayer. You can see the below diagram. The phospholipid bilayer is look like this, and it is made up of a hydrophobic tail, which is you can see here, though avoids the water, and that's why they what is shadow inside, or it shies towards the water. That's why it is arranged inside the plasma membrane. It well arranged and it avoids water. And the phosphate head part, which you can see there, it is near to the water. The blue shade you can see there, it nears to the water. That's why it is hydrophilic, because it loves the water and ready to mingle with the water. Yeah, one of those structure function explains, though the structure and function itself explains the phospholipid bilayer, how its nature it is. So next we move on to the structure of membranes. So how the plasma membrane or phospholipid bilayer can be understood by the fluid mosaic model. So by helping with the help of fluid mosaic model, we can understand well about the plasma membrane. So who proposed this model? The fluid mosaic model is proposed by Singer and Nicholson. Is a more recent and acceptable model for a membrane structure. So these two scientists, the name, a complete name like S.J. Singer and Gert L. Nicholson. These are the well-known scientists who proposed the fluid mosaic model to betterly understand the structure and function of plasma membrane. So, more recent and very acceptable model. It's one of a very acceptable model. It's widely acceptable all over the world. With the help of this model, we can understand and thoroughly about the structure and function of the plasma membrane. We can easily understand how the plasma membrane works and functions. So it is more recent because it is proposed in a very recent year, like 1972. You can see here 1972, and this is one of the biological membrane usually have a thickness of 5 to 8 nanometer. We already discussed it's one of a small membrane. It's very thin and it can be seen only through microscope, that is especially a electron microscope, and we can study about plasma membrane through the electron microscope because it is very small. A membrane is especially composed of a lipid bilayer. The fluid mosaic model we already discussed, it's made up of a lipid bilayer, and the hydrophobic, that is non-polar region of the lipid face each other at core of the bilayer. Why? The hydrophilic polar head, which is region, face outwards. We already discussed about it in the previous slide, right? As let's we move on to the next slide. In 1972, S.J. Singer and Gert L. Nicholson proposed that membrane proteins are inserted into the phospholipid bilayer. So they are these scientists also explains that not only a phospholipid bilayer is made up of a phosphate and lipid group, and in addition with that there is a membrane proteins also present within the phospholipid bilayer, and it is made up of a composition of phosphate phospholipids, proteins and cholesterol, and so many parts you can see in the next slides. So it is like a fluid, that's why it is a mosaic, and it is a fluid mosaic model. So you can see in the diagram, so the phospholipid bilayer is look like this, and the proteins which are embedded within it. You can see here the scientist also explains that the proteins can be seen like icebergs floating on a water. It looks like icebergs which will float on a water, which are floating on a water. Icebergs are floating on a water. This structure is look like that. So you can see the complete fluid mosaic model of a cell membrane. It looks like this, and it is also one of a very familiar structure, and it looks like a sandwich, right? Yes, the upper layer is look like a upper bread, and lower layer is like a lower bread, and within that there is a sandwich part. That's why it looks like a sandwich also. So and it is made up of many composition. That is, it made up of glycolipids, cholesterol, carbohydrate group. That is, there are two types of membrane. Peripheral membrane protein, that is proteins, two types of proteins are there: peripheral membrane proteins and integral membrane proteins. And in addition with that, globular proteins can be seen, and it's a hydrophilic polar head you can see there, and hydro phobic non-polar tails you can see inside of the plasma membrane, and this is well arranged, right? So phospholipid bilayer, you can see that. So what is the why the cholesterol is present there? So cholesterol, we all thought that, and we all assume that cholesterol is a very bad for our health, right? Yes, not like that. So cholesterol is in the normal condition, in a better amount of cholesterol, which is healthy for our body. And cholesterol which is present here, the plasma membrane, it helps to fluidity and structural integrity. It maintains the structural integrity of a plasma membrane. So cholesterol helps the movement and freely flowing of a plasma membrane. That's why it flows like a water, and it's not a rigid like structure. It's not a stone. It's a flow phospholipid bilayer. It's a rigid, not a rigid in nature. It's a very fluidly floating like structure. So cholesterol helps in the fluidity, and it maintains the structural integrity of a plasma membrane. So you can see the so many types of proteins, right? So peripheral protein. What do you mean by peripheral protein? Peripheral means the name itself tells that partially or attached freely. So it is attached very freely, and that's why it is called a peripheral membrane. In some cases, like in small changes, like in the pH, and it's small changes in the environment can get rid this peripheral membrane protein. It removes the peripheral membrane protein. Very small changes can removes this peripheral membrane protein. But integral membrane protein, the name itself tells that integral means it embedded within side of the plasma membrane, which is present exactly middle of the plasma membrane, and it covers both the upper leaflet of a plasma membrane and lower leaflet of a phospholipid bilayer. That's why it is called a integral membrane protein. By this, the integral membrane protein, which is attached completely inside or embedded within the plasma membrane, that's why it cannot be removed very easily in the extreme condition, like cell rupture, or in means plasma membrane rupture, like in the treatment of detergent and soap. That's in that extreme condition, the plasma membrane itself disrupted, and that time the integral membrane protein can be separated. So you can see the carbohydrate part. So, and the glycoprotein and glycolipid, you can see the snake-like structure, which is a beaded-like structure, which is attached to the upper layer of the phospholipid bilayer itself, and upper layer of the it as attached to the protein. Yes, the carbohydrate part, which is also a glucose, that is made up of a glucose, that is glyco. That's why it is called a glyco. The carbohydrate part, which is attached to the phosphate head, you can see phosphate head, that lipid is called, that part of a carbohydrate is called a glycolipid. The carbohydrate part, which is attached directly to the phosphate head of a plasma membrane, that is called a glycolipid, which is directly attached to the lipid part. But in case of glycoprotein, that's not like that. It's a little bit different from the glycolipid. The carbohydrate part, which is attached to the protein part, you can see that the small blue like structure which is attached to the carbohydrate part, that part is called a glycoprotein. That type of protein is called a glycoprotein. The protein which is attached to the carbohydrate part, the lipid which is attached to the carbohydrate part is called a glycolipid, and the protein which is attached to the carbohydrate part, that is a glycoprotein. And you can see the globular protein. What do you mean by globular protein? So the name itself tells that globular. Globe means a globe-like structure, the circular in shape or spherical in shape. That's why the protein which is in spherical in shape, that's why it is called a globular protein. And another addition, you can see here hydrophilic polar head and hydrophobic non-polar tail. So what do you mean by polar? Polar is one of the condition which has a uneven distribution of electrons can be seen. That's why it is always wants to mingle with the water. That polar head part always wants to mingle with the water. But hydrophobic non-polar means the electrons are completely distributed all over the part. That's why it doesn't want to mingle with any electrons which is present in the water. That's why it repels the water. That's why it is called a hydrophobic in nature. And you can see the complete structure of the phospholipid bilayer. And you can see the clear image, that is one of the zooming image. You can see that you can see very clearly in this slide. And fluid mosaic model, glycoprotein is look like that, and glycolipid is attached to the directly lipid part of the plasma membrane, and a phospholipid you can see here, and a peripheral protein which is attached very lightly, and it is very easily attached, and very outside of the plasma membrane. That's why it can be removed easily by small changes in the pH. But you can see here integral membrane protein, which is embedded completely inside the plasma membrane, and it helps in the transportation of some of the other proteins and some of the larger molecules like water, and some of the lipid insoluble molecules can pass through this integral membrane protein. But some of the lipid soluble molecules like carbon dioxide and water, it can directly enter through the plasma membrane itself very easily. So what is the function of plasma membrane? Let's discuss about the function of plasma membrane. So the structure is thin and flexible boundary between the cell and its environment needed for homeostasis. So the sentence itself tells that homeostasis, homeo means maintaining equilibrium. The state in which the cell maintain its equilibrium and the cell maintain its living nature and helps in the better survivability of a cell. That condition is called a homeostasis. So the plasma membrane helps to maintain the homeostasis of a cell, and it protects the cell from a very dangerous situation, and it helps to better survivability of a cell and allows nutrients into the cell. And plasma membrane helps to uh, uh, it allows some of the nutrients which is passed inside the cell and allows waste to leave the cell, and some of the waste products which is created by a cell, it can be expelled out through the plasma membrane. That is the function it can perform well. So provide structural support to the cell as the plasma membrane, that is cell membrane, which has a boundary like structure which helps to maintain the cell. The cell itself has a own structure. That structure is maintained by a plasma membrane. That's why it works like a boundary. So we have a Indian boundary, right? It separates India from Pakistan and China, right? That's why like that only the plasma membrane is separated from its outer external environment from the internal environment, and the cell maintains its structure with the help of a plasma membrane. So plays role in a cell communication, as the plasma membrane helps in the communication of cells, which is beside of the cell nature. The neighboring cells can be communicate with each other with the help of a plasma membrane by exchanging some of the enzymes, proteins, and so many things. So selectively permeability. Looking to the permeability of a plasma membrane, it is very selective. Means it is a semi-permeable membrane. Plasma membrane is also called a semi-permeable membrane or selectively permeable membrane. That's why it doesn't enter some all the things which inside which is outside of the cell. It only selects some of the molecules, some of the important nutrients and substances can only be entered through a plasma membrane. It doesn't want it does not it do not allow everything which can pass inside the cell. So that's why it's a selectively permeable. It selects some of the nutrients and substances which can enter the cell. The plasma membrane controls the movement of substances in and out of the cell, as we clear with that, and controls the amount of substances entering the cell and controls the amount of substances leaving the cell. It maintains the movements which can move out of the cell and which can enter the cell, and this performance is also, this function is also called as a endocytosis and exocytosis. Endocytosis means the receiving of some of the molecules inside the cell, that is endocytosis. Endo means enter to the cell, and which absorbs some of the molecules, and it will bulge, the cell will be bulge or cell will be filled, that is called endocytosis. And exocytosis means, exo means throwing out or removing, throwing out. That cytosis means the cell which expels or which removes some of the waste products from the cell, that is called exocytosis. We can see this type of function is performed by a plasma membrane. So let's see some of the topic. So the plasma membrane is a composition of lipids, proteins, carbohydrates. These are all the composition of cell membrane, that is plasma membrane. In lipids, we can see the phospholipids and cholesterol, which part the cholesterol which is embedded within inside of the plasma membrane, which helps in the maintains the structural integrity of a plasma membrane. And phospholipid bilayer is a one of the it works like a backbone of a phospholipid plasma membrane, which helps in the maintaining the structural integrity of a plasma membrane. So you can see the proteins are very perform and proteins can be seen in various types, and it helps in the transport proteins, and it helps has a receptors which receive some of the molecules from outside to inside, and it has proteins also helps like addition molecules. Adhesion means it attaches some of the anchorage. It helps into anchorage, and proteins which helps to addition some of the molecules which is necessary to the plasma membrane, that is which is necessary to the cell which is attached to this proteins, and that's why it is a works like a addition molecules. And it also helps in the antigen. It also works like an antigen. Antigen means which produces the immune response, which will helps to fight against some of the pathogens and some of the unwanted harmful materials. So it works like a antigen also, and it also helps like a submembrane cytoskeleton. So means it maintains the structural integrity, and it gives the additional support to the plasma membrane. So that's why it performs like a submembrane cytoskeleton also, and it is a work like a secondary messengers, which helps in the immune response. And it also helps to it also works like enzymes, so which helps into the function and some of the basic function needed for our cell. That's the enzyme which enhance which catalyze the structure, and as enzymes will rapids the chemical reaction, which are we can see in the plasma membrane. The chemical reaction is very faster with the help of enzymes. And carbohydrates, we can see the two types of carbohydrate part which is attached to the plasma membrane. That's why the carbohydrate part which is attached directly to the protein, that protein is called a glycoprotein. And the carbohydrate part which is attached to the directly to the lipid part of a plasma membrane, that is called a glycolipid, which also helps in the receptors, which also helps to in the immune reaction, which the carbohydrates is look like a network like structure, and it look like a some of pin like structure which is attached to the some of the pathogens, some of the harmful materials. And it also helps in the immune reaction. It immunes the cell from very some various threats, and some various pathogens, and it also helps in the immune reaction. And that's it, guys. That's all about today's topic. And if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe the channel and like this video if you are interested. So, and if you are interested, please share this YouTube channel with your friends, and share this video to with your friends, and please support us. And we will see you in the next video. Thank you so much, everyone.